audio so that people who aren't here today can listen to the presentations online afterwards. So at beachsamp.org you'll be able to view any of these slides and hear the audio. So just to briefly go over the agenda, we're going to start with some update on some of the tools that we've developed. So Grover and I will discuss STORMTOOLS, which is a new online map viewer to look at storm surge and sea level rise. John Boothroyd and Brian Oakley will then give us an update on shoreline change mapping. Then Jim Boyd from CRMC will give us an update on some marsh migration mapping that's been completed. And Caitlin Chafee will give us an update on the salt marsh restoration projects. And finally, I'll just share briefly some other tools we've developed for municipalities, waterfront businesses, and coastal property owners. And then the second half of the meeting will be geared towards going over this table of contents, draft outline, and the process, the public commenting process for the development of the SAMP. So let's jump right into it. There's been a lot of work that's been happening over the past year and a half, ever since we've gained a lot more funding for the beach SAMP. And we wanted this meeting to be geared specifically towards updating you all on what we've been developing. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that coastal municipalities throughout the state were also aware and informed of what the beach SAMP has been producing to help them inform their decision making. So this is a screenshot of a coastal municipality memo that we sent out at the beginning of June, and it contains a lot of the things we'll be talking about today. But this will be a series of memos that we'll send out to municipal decision makers, staff, planners, council presidents, emergency managers, just to keep them in the loop about some of these tools and resources we've been developing. As I mentioned, STORMTOOLS is a really robust and innovative online map viewer that has been developed through the beach SAMP, and we had a whole meeting devoted to this online map viewer. And what makes this tool so unique is that it maps both storms and sea level rise together for all of Rhode Island, and it does it at a very fine resolution and allows anyone, whether you be a coastal property owner, a municipal planner, to really understand what the level of risk is to your community from different size storms, whether they be a 25, 50, or 100-year storm, plus some level of sea level rise. And the applications can help with just understanding your own personal risk, but also day-to-day municipal operations, as well as long-term planning and financing decisions at the local level. This is all online. You don't need any special software to view it. If you go to beachsamp.org, under the Resources and Tools page, you'll see STORMTOOLS is there. And we've recently revamped it so that it's much easier for anyone to use. So we were recently at the Volva Ocean Race and shared STORMTOOLS with many of the people walking through the exhibits. And what people really want to know is, I want to search for my address, and I want to know, am I at risk from storm surge? How deep will the water be during a Category 3 hurricane? And am I going to be impacted by sea level rise? So we made one map that has all that information in one place. So we call this STORMTOOLS for Beginners, but it's very useful, and you can just enter your address into this address call-out box up here. And you can click on the side legend that says, is my property vulnerable to storm surge during a 100-year coastal storm, such as the 1938 hurricane. And you can zoom in just like you would with Google Earth, or any type of map viewer and look directly at your property. And we did that a lot at the Volvo Ocean Race with many people around the state. And a lot of Massachusetts and Connecticut people wanted it for their states as well, but currently this is only for Rhode Island. So you can also then click on the question, how deep will the water be during a 100-year storm event? And so at this particular address, it will be approximately 5 feet during that type of storm event. And then what about just sea level rise? 2 tides a day, every day. Is my property going to be impacted? You can do the same sort of thing and look at 1, 2, 3, or 5 feet of sea level rise. So we're really trying to make this much more user-friendly, just for anyone to understand their risk. But at the same time, this tool is so powerful that it can be really useful to local decision makers and practitioners. So the more advanced storm tools for practitioners is more about long-term planning. Right here, this map shows population density combined with E911 structure. So basically, it's putting people where the buildings are. So this is density of people matched with the location of properties. And so from there, you can then look at, okay, if I had a 100-year storm event with a certain amount of sea level rise, how many people, what's the density of people that will be impacted in my area? And then you can also look at critical facilities. These are statewide data layers that look at emergency medical services, fire stations. This is Warwick Neck. And STORMTOOLS allows you to visualize that with a 25-year storm event plus sea level rise, that floodwater could create a barrier between Warwick Neck and the mainland. And so what does that mean for police, fire, and emergency management planning? And this critical infrastructure layer exists for the entire state and has lots of information about the particular address, the station, and it helps emergency planners, emergency managers plan for the placement of existing fire stations or targeting different emergency responders during storm events. Definitely impacted, and that needs to be considered when planning for state evacuation routes. So we've really tried to make this tool, the power of it, much more user-friendly. And this STORMTOOLS is still in progress. It's advancing every day. There seems to be a new layer that comes out almost every week, it seems like. But Rhode Island should be really proud that we have such an amazing tool that can help us be more prepared. Did you want to say anything more about that before I move on to future steps?
About this one?
Either one.
Michelle indicated the tool is becoming very, it's expanding its capabilities all the time. We now have a modeling capability that backs this tool, so that we are developing, and you'll hear about this a little bit, some very high resolution mapping capability. But what we are able to do now is we refine the model, and some of the researchers using artificial intelligence capability have the model essentially training itself to predict storms. It's gotten to the point now where the model can taking 5 parameters out of National Hurricane Center as the hurricanes are coming up the coast, show you what a potential surge from that hurricane event would look like before it even arrives here. So it gives us the capability to see where the storm surge might impact areas around the state. We can disseminate that information to the EMA planners and all the rest of it, and they will have that ability to look at these events before they arrive. So that's some of the things that are coming out of this. As Michelle's indicated, this is a new tool that we're looking at. We just received funding from HUD to actually work on this tool. This is essentially taking STORMTOOLS plus some other data that are feeding into STORMTOOLS, which you're going to hear about from John and Brian here shortly, as well as some other data that we're putting into it. And what we'll be able to do is assign a risk value to each segment of the shoreline, so that we can show you based on things like waves, surge, sea level rise, erosion rates, projected erosion, the geomorphology of the shore. That will all factor into a weighting scheme that will evaluate that in terms of the risk of that particular segment of shoreline. Then taking that with the model capability that we have, we can take the land use coverage along with some damage functions that have been developed for particular structures during certain storm events, and you can start to match that up and get a picture of what the damage might be from certain storm events. Obviously, that is extremely useful for planning purposes, particularly for municipalities to understand that for the mitigation capability, for planning for these events before they arrive, because this becomes very important in their funding that they receive from FEMA. If they can have it within a hazard mitigation plan and identify what the risk is and how they're going to deal with that risk, when the storm eventually does come, they will be able to then fund out of those mitigation measures that they've identified and receive funding for that. So without that tool, they wouldn't be able to identify those risks and understand that. And it would reduce our funding availability that we would get from the federal government as a result of that. So these are some of the things that we're building into this tool now. And it's cutting edge. I mean, it's not being developed anywhere else, really.
And we will likely have future stakeholder meetings that are talking about both that Coastal Resilience Index, as well as Grover mentioned this very advanced real-time flood forecasting system for Rhode Island, which takes 5 parameters, as Grover said, out of the hurricane forecast and can then extrapolate from that what flooding in Rhode Island will look like for us, which is amazing.
So we're very advanced within the coastal areas, but unfortunately we've been sort of lagging behind in the inland areas. However, HUD, again, just funded the council almost $200,000 to work with the National Weather Service and the university to develop a hydrodynamic model for the Patuxent River and start to project what flooding might look like for the Patuxent River. Eventually, what we're hoping to do is look at what's called a coupling effect. So when you get a wet hurricane coming in, depositing a lot of rain on the watershed, and that's causing flooding coming down, and it meets a storm surge, those two events, when they meet each other, worsen the flooding event that would be typically seen from one or the other singly. So we're moving towards that particular thing, and then what we're hoping to do once we get the Patuxent done, we hope to then move to the other rivers. Eventually, what we're hoping to do is have a tool that looks like STORMTOOLS, whether you're inland or in the coastal area. It will be a seamless tool that you can have to look at flooding issues or other types of events that we need to plan for.
Progress to date or future? John, yeah.
So the next step would be if people want to do low impact or put in some of the PMPs, do some low impact protection, could there be a layer of modeling that says, okay, we reduce our risk exposure by 50%, and we can put in berms or we can put in vegetation or something. Is that a potential extension of the tool, and then you could run scenarios on top of options of the neighborhood or stretch of coastline?
Yeah, that's getting pretty sophisticated. I think what the tool will enable you to do is particularly the risk index that we're looking at, because it will have not only surge but wave data into it, will allow you to evaluate whether certain techniques, how viable they're going to be in certain areas. The council is also part of a regional group right now called the Northeast Regional Ocean Council. It is all the New England states that are together, have put in an application to go to NOAA to essentially take this modeling and go to high resolution forecast systems for certain areas of the state that we've identified as being most susceptible to these events. Then what we're also hoping to do is use it as a basis to look and evaluate for green infrastructure. So we are partnering with the TNC and other groups to look at the current status of green infrastructure as particularly relates to shoreline protection, because green infrastructure is sort of a moniker for a lot of different techniques and tools that are used by people. We will be taking to see what the state of the art is for those, and then trying to evaluate using the tools that we have, what techniques may be appropriate for certain areas. So that's sort of what you're talking about, but not necessarily modeling right down to see what the performance of it is. Part of that is also to evaluate the performance of these, because we don't have a lot of history in green infrastructure as part of that. Also, part of the money would be going to CRC and others to run training sessions on green infrastructure and the use as part of the shoreline protection toolkit that we're looking to have as part of the deep sea.
Is there thinking about this, the risk assessment, where a single number would come up and it's identifying some risk for a particular piece of property? Is there a formal link with the federal flood insurance program where as soon as these numbers come out, many of us in the room here that day, things might change for us?
No.
No.
There's no intent to prepare that up. The federal flood insurance program is a standalone program, so it's not intended, nor has FEMA any desire, I think, to use that indices to evaluate. So.
I'm going to pass it over to Brian. We'll have time for more questions afterwards, but Sean and Brian will